My name is Ursula Yuri Kane. I am 34 years old, a commissioned officer in the United States Army, and I have devoted every year of my adult life to serving this nation in places most civilians will never lay eyes on. I have executed missions that never surfaced in any headline. Operations where a single miscalculation could shatter the security of an entire city. People once referred to me as a ghost because I could melt into darkness and return carrying answers no one else had been able to unearth. But that night, standing inside the Grand Hall of the Pentagon, invisibility was the last thing I had. I was the eye of a storm I had never seen approaching. The room was crowded with senior officers. Dozens of uniformed figures lined the aisles, their ribbons and stars catching glints of harsh white light. I had just come back from an overseas operation that had pressed every boundary of my body and mind. My orders had been classified. My debriefing had been conducted in private. I had followed every protocol by the letter. And yet, when my father, General Harris, approached the podium, I noticed something in his expression I had not witnessed since childhood. Raw, unrestrained fury. "You're a traitor," he thundered, his voice reverberating through the vaulted chamber. My chest tightened. For a brief moment, I convinced myself I had misheard him. My father was among the most decorated generals the Army had ever produced. He was also the man who raised me to place duty above everything else. And now, in front of hundreds of our peers, he was branding me a traitor to the very country I had nearly given my life defending. A heavy hush descended over the hall. My father descended from the podium and crossed the space between us with heavy, deliberate strides. He seized the collar of my uniform and tore the rank insignia from my shoulders with his bare hands. The sound of ripping fabric was thunderous in the silence. One by one, he removed the patches, the ribbons, the emblems of my years of service. His hands trembled with rage. I stood absolutely still, staring straight ahead, refusing to let any of them witness me crumble. Then it happened. His fingers caught on the back of my jacket and wrenched so forcefully that the seams gave way. A sliver of air brushed the skin of my upper back, and for the briefest instant, I felt the room tilt. They had seen it, the edge of a tattoo I had kept concealed for years. It was only a fragment of the full design, but it was sufficient to freeze every whispered word on every pair of lips. I could have offered an explanation right then. I could have pleaded with him to stop, but I did neither. Instead, I reached up, unlatched the remaining fasteners, and deliberately slid the torn jacket from my shoulders. The fabric crumpled into a heap at my feet. I turned my back to the audience and let them finally see the complete tattoo. It stretched across my shoulder blades, a black and silver emblem of wings encircling a single star. Those who understood, understood. It was the classified insignia of the Orion Phantom Unit, an ultra-black operations group that had officially ceased to exist for more than a decade. Gasps rippled through the crowd. One voice rose above the rest. "Is that even possible?" someone whispered. Another hissed. "Only the president can activate Orion. Only legends ever wore that mark." I remained silent, my breathing slow and controlled, the pressure of 100 stairs pressing against me. But I refused to waver. My father's jaw was rigid with confusion now, the anger draining from his face as the truth crept in. Yet he still issued the next order out of habit, out of pride. "Guards, arrest her immediately." Nobody moved. The standstill stretched into eternity. Then a chair scraped loudly at the front of the room. Admiral Rowe, the highest-ranking naval officer present, rose to his feet. He was a man renowned for his composure, for never betraying fear. But when his eyes met mine and then traveled to the tattoo blazing across my back, I saw his breath catch. "Sir," he said slowly, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall. "Oh God, she outranks you." The words landed like a detonation. My father's face turned ghostly pale. Murmurs erupted, a tide of disbelief surging through the crowd. Someone muttered, "The Orion Phantom Unit was dissolved more than 10 years ago. How could she?" Another said, "If she's Orion, she reports directly to the president. No one here has jurisdiction over her." I bent down, gathered the torn jacket, and held it loosely in my hands. A young security officer stepped forward in silence, extending a fresh coat from his own shoulders. I nodded my thanks and slipped it on without a word. My movements were deliberate, composed, as though I were still operating on the battlefield. I could feel my father's eyes burning into me, but I did not look at him. Not yet. Admiral Rowe cleared his throat, commanding silence once more. "This proceeding is suspended effective immediately," he declared. "We will verify the facts before any further action is taken." My father bristled, his pride unwilling to yield even now. "Admiral, you cannot simply—" "I can," Rowe cut him off. "And I will. If Captain Kane is indeed Orion, you have no jurisdiction over her. None of us do." I caught the flicker of uncertainty crossing my father's expression. He had constructed his entire career upon absolute control, and now that control was slipping through his fingers. He wanted to shout, to command the guards into action, but even the soldiers positioned along the walls had gone still. Nobody wanted to be the one to lay hands on a member of Orion. Rose stepped closer to me, his voice dropping to a register meant for my ears alone. "You need to come with me, for your safety and for theirs," he said, nodding toward the restless crowd. "We have a secure area prepared." I nodded once, not trusting myself to speak. A pair of security officers fell in a step beside me, not as captors but as escorts. We left the hall together, the echo of our boots ringing through the corridor. As we walked, I caught fragments of the murmurs left in our wake. Was she really Orion? That would mean, do you think she betrayed the unit? No one betrays Orion and lives. Inside, my mind was already moving faster than my feet. Ro might be trying to protect me, or he might be moving me somewhere I could be silenced without witnesses. Either way, I had to stay alive long enough to uncover who had set me up. We reached the secure wing of the Pentagon, a place few held clearance to enter. The walls here were thicker, the lights colder, the silence absolute. Rose stopped outside a reinforced steel door and studied me carefully. "You understand this is not a cell," he said. "But until we understand what is happening, you need to remain here." I held his gaze steadily. "I understand. But know this, Admiral. I will find out who is behind this. And when I do, they will wish they had never heard my call sign." He gave a short nod, his jaw tight. "Valkyrie," he whispered, the name half respectful, half afraid. Then the door sealed shut behind me. I leaned against the wall and let the silence settle. For the first time, I allowed myself to exhale. That was the moment I grasped the full reality. The entire world believed I was a traitor, and unless I could expose the real enemy, they would be proven right. That was the first moment, I said quietly into the empty room, when the world thought I was the villain. But I knew I had to survive, and I had to turn the entire board upside down. The steel door shut behind me with a dull, final thud. I stood motionless for a moment, letting my eyes adjust to the sterile glow of the isolation chamber. It was small, no more than 12 feet by 12 feet. The walls painted a flat, featureless gray. A single fluorescent light flickered overhead, buzzing faintly like an insect trapped inside a jar. The air was cold enough to raise goosebumps along my arms. There was no window, no clock, and no sound beyond the hum of the ventilation system. I knew precisely what this was. A containment room inside the Pentagon's secure wing was not technically a cell, but it might as well have been one. Its design was intentional. Strip away every distraction, leave the occupant alone with their thoughts until those thoughts became weapons turned inward. It was built to erode a person slowly, but I was not someone who eroded easily. I settled onto the metal bench bolted to the wall and clasped my hands together, forcing my breathing into a steady rhythm. I had been given no explanation, no timetable, only Admiral Rowe's vague assurance that I was being kept safe. I doubted even he knew what would come next. There were no lawyers, no briefings, no guarantees. I was alone. That word had always carried me backward. My mind reached for the past, for the place where everything had first begun. I closed my eyes and I was 19 again, standing on a rain-slicked tarmac at Fort Bragg, a single duffel bag at my feet, and nobody there to see me off. I still heard the recruiter's words echoing in my ears. You'll disappear into a program that doesn't exist. Do you understand the cost? I had understood completely, and I had still signed my name. Orion Phantom Unit. Even now, simply thinking the name sent a shiver through me. We were ghosts. We carried no ranks, no service records, no official identities. The world believed we had been dissolved a decade earlier, and that was precisely the point. We were the contingency no one wanted to acknowledge existed. A surgical team of assassins, infiltrators, and saboteurs who could operate without oversight whenever national security demanded it. The training had been brutal. We slept 4 hours a night when fortune allowed. Our bodies were dismantled and rebuilt from the ground up. My weapon was the rifle, and my instructors drove me until the crosshairs felt as natural as breathing. I could strike a moving target at 1,000 yards in wind or rain with no margin for a second attempt. They named me Valkyrie after my first live mission. I'd been 19 years old and already carried the lives of 10 men on my trigger finger. I opened my eyes, pulling myself back into the present. But the memories kept seeping in. The faces of my Orion teammates surfaced behind my eyelids. Mackenzie, the communications wizard who could breach anything carrying a signal. Reyes, who could dismantle a bomb blindfolded. Chun, the medic who had patched me up more times than I could count. We had been a family forged in fire, bound to one another in ways the outside world would never comprehend. And then one day, without warning, Orion had vanished. The unit was disbanded, the survivors dispersed, the files buried so deeply they might as well have been incinerated. But I had never truly left. Orion had marked me, literally. The tattoo on my back was a symbol known only to those who had earned it. It was not decoration. It was a warning. Anyone who recognized it understood the cost of crossing someone like me. And now that mark had been revealed in the most public manner imaginable. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. Someone had orchestrated this. My father's outburst in the Great Hall had been too sudden, too theatrical. He believed I had betrayed the country. But who had planted that belief? Who had whispered into his ear? My instincts told me that the same enemies I had faced in Orion's Shadow Wars were moving again, pulling strings from the darkness. The light above me flickered harder, plunging the room into momentary blackness before buzzing back to life. My reflection stared back at me from the polished steel of the door. I barely recognized the woman looking back. Jaw set, eyes sharp, shoulders still squared, even in solitude. I had only a few hours, perhaps fewer, before someone decided my fate. I could sit here and let them choose, or I could begin assembling the pieces myself. I straightened slowly, every muscle coiled with purpose. If my enemies wanted to drag me back into the shadows, I would meet them there. And this time, I would carry the light with me. I could picture my father clearly even without sharing a room with him. General Harris, the man whose voice could silence an entire command center, was undoubtedly pacing the length of his office at that very moment. Every surface in that room was sharp and immaculate, a reflection of the man himself. He believed in order. He believed in control. And he believed without any doubt that I had betrayed the very institution he had devoted his life to. From the isolation chamber, I imagined him hunched over classified reports, jaw locked as he reread casualty count from the last mission. That operation had cost lives, good men and women who would never be coming home. And someone had leaked intelligence that compromised the entire team. He was certain that someone was me. To his mind, it made perfect sense. I had returned from a mission earlier than anticipated, without the formalities of standard debriefing. My commanding officers could not access my full orders because they were sealed beneath Orion's classification protocols. And then there was the tattoo. To most, it was nothing more than a relic from a disbanded unit. To my father, it represented secrets, loyalties he could not govern. I closed my eyes and felt the familiar ache in my chest. My father and I had always inhabited different worlds, even while wearing the same uniform. From the time I was a child, he treated me less like a daughter and more like a soldier in development. I could still remember standing at attention in our backyard at 8 years old, my tiny feet planted in the grass while he barked instructions about posture, discipline, and honor. He told me once that the Kane family name was a torch, and I was expected to carry it without ever letting it gutter out. At first, I tried. I studied relentlessly, earned top scores at the academy, won marksmanship competitions just to catch the rare flicker of pride in his eyes. But pride from General Harris was always conditional. When I graduated early, he called it expected. When I volunteered for my first deployment at 19, he didn't ask if I was ready. He simply said, "Don't embarrass me." The memory shifted into a flashback so vivid it felt like stepping through a door. I was 19 again, packing my gear in the dim barracks at Fort Bragg. My father had stopped by unexpectedly, filling the doorway like a shadow. "You don't have to go," he had said, his voice low. But it wasn't concern I detected. It was a warning. "If you go, you'd better come back with results. The K name doesn't tolerate failure." "I know, sir," I had replied automatically. I didn't call him Dad. That word had not felt natural on my tongue for years. He'd stepped closer then, adjusting the strap on my pack as though I were one of his soldiers. "You're smart, Yuri. Don't go soft out there. There's no room for weakness in this family." Those words had seared into me as I boarded the transport plane. I didn't recognize it at the time, but that was the day I stopped reaching for his approval. Somewhere between the explosions and the stillness of sniper positions, I understood that my life could not revolve around a man who saw me only as an extension of his legacy. Back in the present, I imagined him now, fists clenched as he reviewed surveillance footage from the mission that had gone wrong. He would be fixating on every angle, searching for confirmation that I had betrayed him, betrayed the country, betrayed the family name. That was how he rationalized what he had done in the Great Hall, stripping my insignia in front of hundreds of officers. In his mind, he was protecting the institution. He didn't frame it as humiliating me. He viewed it as upholding the standard he lived by. But the truth was that my father no longer knew me. He didn't know what I had endured within Orion. He didn't know the things I had done to keep this country safe, the ghosts I carried across my shoulders. And now, because he refused to see past his own certainty of my guilt, he had become a weapon in someone else's hands. I leaned back against the cold wall of the isolation chamber and let that thought settle. If I wanted to survive this, I couldn't simply clear my name. I would have to expose the shadow that had convinced my father I was a traitor. And somewhere deep inside me, a voice I hadn't heard in years whispered, "You'll have to face him again. And this time, you can't afford to lose." The door to the isolation chamber opened with a mechanical hiss, and I recognized the man who stepped in immediately. Admiral Rowe required no introduction. His reputation arrived well ahead of him. He was the highest-ranking officer in the room earlier, the one whose voice had quieted the chaos when my tattoo was revealed. He carried the weight of decades in service, his uniform immaculate, every ribbon perfectly aligned. But his eyes were what struck me most, calculating yet cautious, like a man approaching a weapon he wasn't certain was disarmed. He dismissed the two security personnel with a flick of his hand and waited until the door sealed behind them before speaking. "Captain," he stopped himself, adjusting his address. "Ursula Kane, or should I call you by your call sign, Valkyrie?" The name, long buried, sent a ripple down my spine, but I didn't flinch. "You can call me whatever you need to, Admiral," I said evenly. My voice gave nothing away about the storm building beneath the surface. He stepped closer, his boots echoing against the tile, hands clasped behind his back. "I need you to understand the position you're in," he said. "If you truly are a surviving member of the Orion Phantom Unit, then you are a national asset, one of the last remnants of a unit so classified that even the president must tread carefully to invoke it. But if you betrayed us, if you're responsible for what happened on that last mission, then I will personally issue the order to end your life. Do you understand me, Kane?" I held his stare without wavering. "I understand you perfectly, but you need to understand something as well, Admiral. Whether you regard me as an asset or a liability doesn't alter reality. And reality is that the real traitor is out there, sitting comfortably in a room full of officers who have no idea how deeply they've been compromised." Rowe's jaw tightened. He was unaccustomed to being challenged. "Those are serious accusations, Captain. You'll need more than defiance to persuade me. I'm not here to persuade you, I said, my voice steady. I'm here to survive and to finish what Orion started. His brows drew together as he studied me, perhaps weighing whether I was reckless or deliberate. Your father believes you leaked classified intelligence that cost American lives, he said slowly. He's not alone in that belief. You vanished off the grid for 36 hours after the operation. That alone raises significant questions. I let the accusation hang in the air, my silence intentional, then leaned forward slightly. You've reviewed my sealed record, Admiral. You know Orion's directives. Disappearances occur because our missions require them. But you also know I was trained for. If I had wanted to vanish permanently, I would have. I'm here because someone wants me silenced, and they're using my father as their blunt instrument. The mention of my father unsettled him, though he masked it well. General Harris has a reputation for being uncompromising, but he believes in the chain of command, Rose said. No, I corrected him. He believes in control. And right now he's being controlled by someone who understands his blind spots, someone who knows that his pride will drive him to act before asking the right questions. For the first time, Admiral Rowe's expression softened fractionally. He was beginning to see the pattern I had already assembled. You're saying your father is being manipulated, he said. I'm saying there's a traitor playing a very long game, I replied. They're concealed in plain sight, and the simplest way to cover their tracks is to make me the scapegoat. I don't need you to trust me, Admiral. I need you to open your eyes before they bury both of us. Rowe remained silent for a long moment, the tension in the room palpable. And he spoke, his voice low. If you're right, we're dealing with something far larger than I had anticipated. But if you're wrong, he let the threat hang deliberately. I'm not wrong, I said. And if you want to find the truth, you'll need me alive. His gaze held mine a moment longer before he finally nodded. You'll remain in protective isolation, he said. For your safety and for the safety of this entire command, I'll initiate an independent review of the intelligence failure. But understand this, Kane. If I find even a fragment of evidence that you betrayed us, I will not hesitate. I allowed a small nod, concealing the rush of determination that surged through me. Understood, Admiral. But you'll find something else instead. And when you do, you're going to realize we don't have much time remaining. He turned sharply, the door sliding open once again. Before stepping out, he glanced back over his shoulder. You'd better hope you're right, Valkyrie. When the door shut behind him, the room was silent again. But my mind was anything but quiet. I knew I had just purchased myself time. Perhaps hours, perhaps days, but it wasn't enough. Someone had choreographed this entire spectacle to destroy me. And the longer I remained in that room, the closer they were to succeeding. I leaned against the cold wall, steadying my breath, the name Valkyrie still echoing in my ears. They wanted me forgotten. They wanted me erased. But I wasn't going anywhere. When the door sealed, I pressed the call panel. I am invoking counsel, I said. I request Ethan Cole, former Orion legal advisor under special access. Record this as preservation of privilege and operational integrity. The intercom went silent. 10 minutes later, Admiral Rowe entered carrying a tablet. You are certain about Cole? He asked. He left government and avoids attention. He is the only attorney who understands Orion procedures without requiring a briefing, I said. He knows how we documented actions when paper trails could not exist. If I was framed, the proof lives inside those shadow ledgers. Rose studied my face, then nodded. I'll authorize contact. He'll meet you here under sealed conditions. If his review contradicts you, I send you to tribunal. Understood. He departed. I reconstructed the mission in my head, the tasking order, the encrypted handshakes, the courier who arrived 9 minutes late. A decoy convoy that never registered on satellite. The moment the net turned to static. Somewhere in that chain, a hand had steered us toward failure. An hour later, 2 plainclothes agents escorted in a man who wore weariness like a second skin. Ethan Cole appeared older. His eyes were unchanged. Attorney-client privilege attaches, he said. Everyone else out. They verified Rowe's order and cleared the room. Ethan sat across from me, opened a worn leather folder, and kept his voice measured. Tell me what they believe you did. Then tell me what you actually did." I laid out the mission in clean, precise lines. He listened without a single interruption. When I finished, he produced a slim gray notebook stamped with a faded Orion crest. "Contingency journals," he said. "Parallel logs. One sealed for counsel, one in the clear. Your team's final sealed entries were preserved under litigation hold. Very few people knew they existed." He slid the notebook across to me. On page 3, my block print had flagged a logistics contractor named Calder, custodian of movement authorities. I had underlined one anomaly and then let it go. His badge had scanned at opposite ends of the depot within 8 minutes. Physically impossible without a duplicate credential or a partner with cloned access. Ethan tapped the underlined entry. "You write like a sniper. No adjectives, only distances. If we corroborate this, we have another suspect." The intercom buzzed. "Admiral, the feeds are erupting," the watch officer said. Rowe returned with his tablet. A headline blazed across the screen. "Former Black Program operative suspected an insider leak. Sources say Pentagon legend under review." A split screen displayed my Academy photo alongside images from the hall. The ticker churned, and public reaction fractured along predictable lines. The country loves myths until a single word makes them recoil. "Traitor." Rowe's tone turned to steel. "The leak originated from inside. Damage control is underway. The storm will peak by nightfall." He looked between us. "You understand what that means?" "It means the architect is burning the house down to smoke me out," I said. "We plan a counter-narrative before the story hardens." Ethan nodded. "We file an emergency preservation order. Compel logistics to freeze access logs for the 36-hour window. Then we brief the Inspector General in camera regarding the contingency journals. We don't surrender copies. We show enough to establish the chain." "Do it," Rowe said. "I'll clear the path." He stepped out to make calls. Ethan leaned in close. "Yuri, your father will double down. He won't help us until the proof is irrefutable." "I know. He has always confused force with clarity." "Then let us give him clarity," Ethan said. "I need your original field notes. Any non-standard media you used. You kept those habits even when command ordered you to stop." "They live here," I said, pressing a finger to my temple. "But there's one thing you can seize today." 2 days before the tasking, Calder submitted a midnight override at the depot and attributed it to a software patch. The request carried my father's digital countersignature, not his handwriting, his stamp. If someone spoofed it, we have a forgery. If he approved it without reading, we have negligence. Either way, it opens a door. Ethan wrote quickly. Rowe returned and handed him a badge. "You're cleared to serve orders and pull logs under my authority," the Admiral said. "Move fast. The press is circling." He left. Ethan tucked his notepad away. "Survival is not the victory," he said. "Vindication is. If you want both, let me do the slow work while you prepare for when the truth surfaces." I stood. "Then we make the proof undeniable," I said. "And we do it before the sun goes down." Ethan arrived before dawn carrying a sealed laptop and the expression he reserved for courtrooms when a witness had just been caught in a lie. He waited for the door to latch, set the machine on the table, and spoke in a voice calibrated for transcripts. "Someone is staging your fall. The crime scene is synthetic. The timeline is counterfeit. Show me," I said. He opened a local archive. No network, no chance of a remote wipe. First, the depot access logs tied to the operation. Your courier's entry registers at 0207 and again at 0201 on opposite doors 90 meters apart. Humondi impossible. Also physically impossible because the second door's magnetic seal still shows a tamper flag from the previous inspection. The software cleared the flag. The hardware never reset. That discrepancy is invaluable. He opened a second window. The video feeds that should correspond to those entries were scrubbed and re-encoded. The audio track was replaced with a loop of distant forklift noise to conceal the splice. Our expert compared the encoder signatures. The facility runs a Pelco H264 profile. The doctored clips carry a generic FFmpeg profile at a bit rate the system is incapable of producing. Whoever did this counted on speed and fear. They forgot the small arithmetic. I felt my shoulders loosen, not from relief, but from alignment. What else? Badge events on your account following the mission. Ethan continued. At 0440, your credential pings a restricted server room. Problem: your badge was inside an evidence envelope signed by the duty officer at Z432. I pulled the envelope from storage. The tamper seal shows heat warping. The adhesive underlayer is bubbled. Someone used a pocket heater to peel it back, then pressed it flat again with a roller. Sloppy, but not visible unless you run a UV pass. He switched to a log viewer. The security information and event management system clocks are GPS synchronized. The depot time server is not. We found a drift of 9 seconds. The forger aligned events to the wrong clock. When you reconcile everything against GPS, they're perfect sequence stutters, like a metronome that skips a beat. Rowell asked for a name, I said. We're converging on one, Ethan replied. Calder Logistics. He submitted a midnight override 2 days before the tasking. The request carried your father's digital countersignature. We examined the cryptographic hash. The signature validates. The key store says it issued the token, but the key store audit log is missing one entry from that hour. The gap is exactly 1 second. Only a console administrator with physical access can pause the daemon and dump it without triggering the alert. That is a ghost admin. Either Calder had assistance, or he is the assistance. What about the attack itself? I asked. Prove the intelligence route was poisoned and the leak traces away from me. Ethan opened packet captures from the mission prep net. A single outbound burst from a maintenance workstation at EO32. Ostensibly harmless, except the workstation's network interface had been disabled in software that week for patching. The burst utilized a management out-of-band channel that only vendors access. We subpoenaed the vendor's records. Someone authenticated using a field engineer token that had been reported stolen 6 months earlier. Embedded in the payload is a salt string we recognized from a previous Orion compromise attempt. Same actor, same vanity signature. That same actor also made your father appear negligent by pushing that counter signature into his queue at the tail end of a briefing block, when he approves routine items in batches. I stood and paced the small room to discharge the tension from my body. The floor felt stable again. Who else knows? Just us and the Admiral, Ethan said. He's ordered preservation across 3 systems and quarantined the depot time server. He's also had public affairs release a bland statement about standard review procedures. It won't stop the speculation, but it buys one news cycle. Another window, another revelation. Ethan pulled up a still frame from a corridor camera near the server room. The image showed a figure in a cap and mask. Unhelpful at first glance, except for a habit too specific to dismiss. The person held their clipboard by the bottom edge, thumb on top, palm facing outward. I had seen that grip across 100 briefings. The hand revealed what the face concealed. You think it's Calder? I said. I think it's someone who learned to imitate calm. Ethan answered. Look at the sleeve. The cuff is taped to prevent snagging inside a rack. That's a technician's habit. Calder is administrative. He doesn't tape cuffs. He delegates the hands-on work. But the clipboard shows a laminated route tag from the courier cage. Only 2 people can sign those at that hour. Calder is one. The other is Master Sergeant Leeds. Leeds maintains the badge printers and the cage locks. He also fired beside me at the range and never missed his reload checks. He wouldn't risk a careless seal. He wouldn't overlook UV unless he wanted us to find it. Ethan smiled without humor. Exactly. This is bait shaped like certainty. If we rush toward Leeds, the real hand cleans up Calder and scrubs the key store. We need to lock them both without telegraphing which one frightens us. So we set a trap, I said. We seed a fabricated narrative into the system, a dummy after-action addendum containing a decoy checksum that only the saboteur would attempt to correct. We monitor who accesses it, how, and then we move you. The leak has made you a symbol, Ethan added. Symbols attract targeting. Roe can transfer you to a compartment inside Navy intelligence for 72 hours under a medical pretext. Your father will resist it. Let him. The noise will mask the move. I surveyed the operational map inside my mind. The lanes, the angles, the shot that matters. Do it. And Ethan, he waited. When this lands, I want the proof to instruct, not simply punish. To prevent. He nodded once. Then he wanted to make it real. Ethan sat across from me, pen frozen above his notepad when I spoke the name aloud. The Orion Phantom Unit wasn't merely a ghost story. We existed, and 10 years ago, we dismantled something that was never meant to surface. Admiral Rowe shifted in his chair, the faintest fracture in his usually unshakable composure. You're claiming this connects to an operation from a decade ago? What kind of operation? I leaned forward, placing my hands flat on the steel table so he could see I had nothing to conceal. Weapons smuggling, sir, but not simple rogue dealers. We were tasked to penetrate a network linking cartel buyers to corrupted intermediaries across multiple governments. That network reached into the Pentagon itself. We recovered manifests pointing to senior officers who had authorized covert sales of next-generation weapons to fund black projects off the books. We intercepted the cargo and shut it down, or so we believed. Ethan's pen scratched a line across the paper. And those officers, what became of them? Nothing public, I said. 2 were quietly retired. 1 was reassigned to a diplomatic post, and the ringleader disappeared, officially declared killed in an accident. But the reality was that we never recovered a body, and the financial trail dissolved into offshore shells before we could anchor it. Orion's files were sealed, and we were ordered never to speak of it again. Rowe's jaw tightened, because if it surfaced publicly, the world would see the military converting its own weapons into contraband. I nodded. Exactly. But I'm telling you now because whoever is framing me is employing identical methods. The clock drift, the missing logs, the stolen vendor token. It feels too recognizable. That network isn't dormant. Someone from that original operation survived, and now they're erasing their trail using the exact same techniques we once used to expose them. Ethan looked up sharply. You're suggesting that someone at the general officer level may still be involved. I didn't hesitate. Yes, and they're powerful enough to make my own father believe I'm the enemy. Harris has always lived by the chain of command. If someone at his level told him I had been compromised, he would accept it as absolute truth. He's not my enemy, but he's being wielded. Rowe exhaled through his nose, his arms crossing in a way that made the decorations on his sleeve glint. He was not accustomed to doubt. Yuri, if you're correct, I cannot simply walk into a Joint Chiefs meeting and level accusations at unnamed ghosts. But I also cannot ignore the evidence Ethan has uncovered. If these people remain embedded, they could compromise far more than you. They could corrupt the entire chain of command. That's precisely why you're hesitating, I said quietly. Because one wrong step and it blows back on the Navy, on the entire Department of Defense. But you need to understand, this isn't about clearing my name anymore. This is about stopping them before they install someone even higher. Ethan tapped his notebook. Rowe, we can cross-reference the shell corporations we tracked 10 years ago against the supply contracts recently authorized. If the same entities surface, that's your probable cause. You don't need to go public yet. You only need to keep Yuri alive and purchase us time. Rowe's eyes found mine. For the first time, I saw something other than suspicion, a glimmer of reluctant trust. If I protect you now, I put my career in their crosshairs. But I also know that the men and women of Orion never walked away from an unfinished fight. If you're one of them, you'll see this through. Are you prepared for that? I straightened, shoulders squared. I've been prepared since the day they marked me with the Orion insignia. I didn't choose this tattoo as decoration. It was a vow, and I don't break vows. He nodded slowly. Then we proceed carefully. Ethan, begin tracing those contracts. Yuri, you remain in the compartment I've arranged. If this leaks any further, you'll be a target for more than character assassination. Ethan raised an eyebrow. You're siding with her? Rowe's reply was measured but resolute. I'm not siding with anyone. I'm hedging against the possibility that the United States military has a malignancy at its core. And if that's true, I'll sacrifice my own stars to excise it. He stood and moved toward the door, but paused with his hand on the frame. Yuri, You have 72 hours. Use them wisely. After that, I won't be able to shield you without evidence I can place on the table like a hammer. I nodded once. I'll get you the hammer, Admiral. Just be ready to swing it when the moment arrives. As the door closed behind him, Ethan looked at me with something poised between admiration and apprehension. Yuri, you just declared war on ghosts. I allowed myself the smallest grim smile. Then I'll hunt them like one. Ethan and I had barely begun outlining our plan when the room's intercom crackled. Admiral Rowe's voice came through colder than before. Yuri, turn on Channel 5. Now. Ethan seized the remote and switched on the wall monitor. My breath caught the instant the footage filled the screen. There I was, unmistakably clear, stepping through the reinforced doors of a remote weapons depot. The timestamp placed me there 48 hours before the explosion that had killed 5 men and obliterated an entire stockpile of classified ordnance. The same explosion I was being accused of engineering. The video zoomed in with clinical precision, pausing as I glanced toward the camera. My face was undeniable. No, isen mater, leaning closer. This makes no sense. You weren't anywhere near that depot. You were debriefing after the extraction op. I was in the room with you. I clenched my jaw, my pulse hammering in my ears. That's not me. Not authentically. Look closer at the shadows. The way the frame stutters. This was composited. The feed cut back to the news anchor, her tone sharp and grave. Military sources confirm the woman in this footage is Ursula Yuri Kane, a former member of the Orion Phantom Unit. Intelligence officials believe she leveraged her training to sabotage the depot, eliminating key evidence tied to recent attacks. Her motives remain unclear, but high-level sources confirm she is considered armed and dangerous. Ethan muted the television, running a hand through his hair. This will be everywhere within the hour. Whoever is behind this isn't simply trying to discredit you. They're burying you alive. I force myself to breathe evenly, pressing the panic down. They're using Orion's own playbook, the deepfake framework, the code that rewrites surveillance feeds, the misdirection. This is precisely how we made high-value targets vanish a decade ago. Now, they're turning it against me. The door to the secured room opened abruptly, and Admiral Rowe strode in flanked by 2 armed MPs. His expression was stone. Yuri, I vouch for you. I suspended judgment when every other flag officer wanted you in cuffs. But after this, I met his stare without yielding. You think I destroyed that depot? Sir, you've reviewed my service record. You know precisely where I was at the time of the blast. He didn't answer immediately. He was a man measuring the weight of evidence against the fragile tether of trust. Finally, he said, Your father just contacted me. He is now more convinced than ever that you're compromised. He's demanding I transfer you to Army CID immediately. Ethan stepped in front of me. Bro, this footage is fabricated. Yuri cannot have been there. I can pull the raw metadata and demonstrate. Proof. Rowe cut him off. Do you understand how the Joint Chiefs operate, Cole? Once a narrative solidifies, it becomes gospel. Every minute I keep Yuri here, I risk my command being accused of obstruction. If I surrender to Harris, she's gone, and you'll never encounter her again except in a courtroom. I stepped forward, keeping my voice controlled. Sir, if you hand me over now, they win. They'll make me disappear just as they erase the Orion files, and they'll bury whatever thread of truth we've managed to pull free. Rowe studied me in silence, then said, Yuri, the world is watching footage that shows you entering a facility where 5 American soldiers died. Even if I believe you, I cannot shield you indefinitely. Do you understand what's at stake? I nodded, completely resolute. And that is precisely why you need to let me vanish on my own terms. Ethan spun around. What? Yuri, you can't simply disappear. That's exactly what they want. No, I said, already mapping the terrain of the depot's surrounding region in my mind. What they want is for me to sit still and await a tribunal. But I'm going to hunt them instead. That video was staged, but the people who staged it had to utilize real facilities and real systems. If I can find their next move before they can manufacture another fabrication, I can unmask them in front of the entire chain of command. Rowe's eyes narrowed. You're asking me to look the other way? I'm asking you to continue doing exactly what you've already been doing, Admiral, I said. Buy me time. You have 72 hours left on that clock. Use them to hold Harris at bay. Meanwhile, I'll go straight to the source. Rowe hesitated, then ordered the MPs to stand back. Yuri, if you're apprehended, I won't be able to prevent them from confining you somewhere so deep you'll never resurface. I gave him a grim smile. I've escaped deeper holes than this. As Rowe left the room, Ethan grabbed my arm. Yuri, this is madness. They're erasing you from a system. Once you're out there, you'll have no backup, no network, only targets on your back. That's acceptable, I said, my voice low and edged with steel, because I understand exactly how they think. And the one lesson Orion drilled into me above all others is how to become the ghost they cannot catch. I looked back at the frozen image of my face on the screen, the counterfeit version of me walking toward the depot, and felt the familiar burn of resolve settle deep in my chest. They want to erase me. Let's see how they manage when the ghost hunts back. Once Rowe departed and the MPs had been redirected to the far corridor, I finally had the breathing space I needed. The small isolation suite was hardly conducive to covert operations. Cameras occupied every corner, and a sensor grid swept continuously for wireless activity. But the Orion Phantom unit had trained me to function under conditions far more hostile. I perched on the edge of the steel-framed cot, rolling my shoulders as though merely restless while my hands worked beneath the mattress. The microspike I had embedded in my boot heel years earlier clicked free with a precise application of pressure. It was a self-contained data tool designed to infiltrate secure nodes through even the most isolated terminals. Ethan had left his tablet behind during his frantic arguments earlier. I slipped the spike into its port, concealing the motion behind the crook of my arm as I pretended to rub my temple. A low vibration hummed through the device. The bypass software was forcing its way into the Pentagon's network using dormant credentials that only Orion veterans would remember existed. The interface came alive, streaming lines of data like rainfall. I filtered through login records, encrypted memos, and personnel transfers, narrowing my focus to the security review report surrounding the weapons depot explosion. My pulse quickened when a directory surfaced that had no right to exist. Project Lamia. I burrowed deeper, clearing firewalls through muscle memory. The files were sparse, most of the metadata scrubbed, but one document remained intact: a roster. I scanned the names, expecting the standard roster of contractors and field operatives. Instead, my father's adjutant, Colonel Nathan Marwick, stared back at me in bold letters. I whispered his name under my breath, barely able to credit it. Marwick had stood at my father's side for 2 decades, a faithful shadow who executed Harris's orders without question. He had been the one barking at MPs during my arrest, hurling accusations like venom. But there was more. A secondary directory revealed encrypted transfers routed through shell corporations connected to Marwick. Payment from accounts that linked directly back to the same armed syndicate Orion had dismantled 10 years earlier. My gut turned cold. Yuri. Ethan's voice came from behind me. I hadn't heard him slip back in. He eased the door shut and stepped closer. You're not supposed to be on that system. I turned the screen toward him, my voice flat. Marwick. He's not simply Harris's lapdog. He's been channeling funds from the same weapons ring Orion exposed. And look at the authorizations. He had clearance to access the depot that exploded. Ethan crouched beside me, jaw tightening. Rowe needs to see this. No, I said sharply. Rowe's name appears throughout this directory. He's not directly implicated, but his clearances were used as cover for several of these authorizations. Someone is using his identity as a shield. If I present this to him now, he'll either panic and shut everything down, or he'll confront Harris and Marwick prematurely. We need more than a name on a list. We need evidence they cannot bury. Ethan hesitated. Yuri, you can't do this alone. They'll anticipate every move you make. They'll anticipate the version of me they know, I said quietly, watching the cursor hover over the final folder. But Orion didn't only train me to shoot straight. They taught me to live in the shadows. Marwick believes he's eliminated the trail, but there's always residue. Payment schedules, courier manifests, dead drops. He's grown careless, too confident under Harris's cover. The door beeped twice, signaling an incoming override. I yanked the spike free and concealed it back in my boot as Ethan powered down the tablet. Admiral Rowe stepped into the room moments later, his expression a mask of command authority. "Yuri," he said curtly, "you'll be transferred to a more secure facility tonight." Harris insists. I gave him a neutral nod, though my chest tightened. A transfer meant fewer options, fewer cracks in the armor. I needed to act now. Rowe's gaze lingered, as if he sensed the storm beneath my surface. 72 hours. That's all I can hold them off. Don't make me regret this. As he departed, Ethan whispered urgently, "What now?" I slipped my boots back on and stood tall. "Now we make Marwick show his hand," I said. "And when he does, we'll have everything we need to dismantle the entire network." The tattoo on my back prickled faintly beneath my shirt, the Orion symbol burning like a brand of purpose. Whoever had framed me had underestimated one fundamental thing. Ghosts like me never stop hunting. They escorted me into the chamber under full guard, though I refused to let the optics unsettle me. The room was populated with senior officers, analysts, and legal counsel, all draped in the polished coldness of the Pentagon. Cameras were prohibited inside, but I could feel the media frenzy reverberating beyond the walls. The traitors' hearing had already consumed every outlet. Admiral Rowe sat at the far end of the table, eyes fixed on me with the same razor focus he'd demonstrated in our earlier meeting. To his right sat General Harris, my father, his face etched with fury. He didn't look at me as a daughter. I was a liability, a stain on the Harris name. Rowe opened the session with a concise outline of the charges: unauthorized contact with foreign nationals, breach of classified operational data, possible complicity in the destruction of a U.S. weapons depot. He asked me to confirm my name and service record. "Commander Ursula Kane," I said, my voice steady and clear. "Formerly attached to the Orion Phantom Unit, operating under direct presidential authorization." General Harris slammed his palm on the table. "She's hiding behind ghosts. Orion was decommissioned years ago. That unit no longer exists." "It does if you understand the chain of command," Rowe said firmly. "And until we possess all the facts, this tribunal will refrain from premature declarations." Harris leaned forward, his eyes like sharpened steel. "Premature? She's compromised entire operations. She's been photographed at the blast site. We should be stripping her commission and confining her, not squandering time debating." I let him finish before speaking. "Sir," I said, addressing him by rank with the same detachment he had always shown me, "the photograph you're referencing was manipulated. There are timestamps embedded in the metadata, placing me over 200 meters away at the moment of the explosion. Admiral Rowe has reviewed the evidence." Rowe nodded slowly. "I have," he confirmed, though it did nothing to ease the tension. The room erupted in overlapping voices, some aligning with Harris, others pressing for a deeper investigation. Outside, reporters broadcast fresh speculation by the minute. I could hear fragments of their commentary through the walls whenever the door opened for a new observer. Hero or traitor? Kane's tattoo linked to the Orion program. The Pentagon divided. The session stretched on for hours, punctuated by heated exchanges. Harris pushed relentlessly for immediate action while Rowe fought to preserve the integrity of the process. When a motion to suspend my commission indefinitely was raised, I stood. "You can suspend me," I said, scanning the faces assembled around me. "But the person you're protecting is still inside this room. You believe I am your threat, but the real traitor is counting on that blindness. If you discard me now, you're handing them everything they want." The silence that followed wasn't agreement, but doubt had taken root. Rowe's hand came down on the gavel. "We adjourn until further notice," he said. "Commander Kane remains in temporary custody, pending final review." The hearing had ended, but the war had only just begun. The next session was smaller, more contained. Only a handful of key officers were present, among them Colonel Nathan Marwick, my father's ever-faithful adjutant. He stood stiffly at attention behind Harris's chair, hands clasped like a soldier carved from granite. I waited until the moment was right, then posed a question I knew would pierce him. "Colonel Marwick," I said, turning slightly in my seat. Do you recall the Lysizabeth operation, the arms cache in Eastern Europe, 2013? His jaw tightened just enough to confirm my suspicion. That operation is classified, he said coolly. And you are in no position to you shouldn't even know the name? I cut him off. The mission was Blacktier Orion. No conventional personnel were briefed. And yet you just flinched. Rowe's eyes narrowed as he studied Marwick. Colonel, he said, his voice carrying a quiet warning. Marwick didn't waver this time. She's baiting me, Admiral. It's what she does. But I could see the perspiration gathering at his collar, his careful composure beginning to fray. I pressed harder. You remember it because you were there, just not on our side. That's why the arms syndicate never fully collapsed. You've been sustaining their pipeline all these years, and now you're framing me to bury the trail. Harris shot to his feet. That's enough, Yuri. His voice cracked through the chamber like a rifle shot. How dare you accuse my most trusted officer of treason? Because he is guilty, I said, holding Marwick's gaze. And the longer you refuse to see that, the deeper this rot spreads through the command you swore to protect. Rowe said nothing, but the suspicion was written plainly across his face. Now he recognized the signs. Marwick was shaken, and it was impossible to deny. The colonel finally broke eye contact and fixed his gaze on the table. She's lying, he said hoarsely, but it was too late. Rowe had registered the same fractures I had. That night, Harris came to see me alone. No guards, no witnesses, only the man who had raised me, standing on the opposite side of the glass partition. His face was lined with anger, but something else lay buried beneath it, something deeper and harder to name. You've destroyed this family, he said quietly, his voice constricted. Do you have any idea what you've done? Our name, our honor, in the dirt because of you. I stepped closer, resting my hands against the cool surface between us. No, Dad, I said softly. You destroyed at the moment you decided I was nothing but a reflection of your ambition. You have never once seen me as a human being. His fists clenched. I pushed you because I wanted you to be strong. Everything I did was for this family's legacy. I shook my head. No, you did it for yourself. And because of that, you cannot even see the traitor standing beside you. You're so consumed with protecting your reputation that you're blind to what Marwick truly is. For the first time, he hesitated. A flicker of doubt crossed his expression, but pride crushed it almost immediately. You've changed, Yuri, he said coldly. I don't recognize you anymore. I held his gaze, my voice composed. That's because you never truly knew me to begin with. The silence between us stretched like a canyon. Harris stepped back, his posture rigid. This is your final opportunity to salvage what remains, he said. Admit what you've done, and I'll fight to keep you out of prison. I didn't waver. I won't confess to crimes I didn't commit. And when the truth emerges, Dad, I hope you'll finally grasp how profoundly wrong you have been. He left without another word, and I stood alone, the weight of our fractured bond pressing down harder than any accusation. But I couldn't allow it to break me. The fight was no longer simply about clearing my name. It was about proving that the values I had been raised to serve still held meaning. And I was running out of time. Ethan and I met in the narrow, fluorescent-lit interview room where I had been permitted occasional legal consultations. This time there was no room for pleasantries. We have to turn this around now, Ethan said, leaning forward. He slid a secure tablet across the table. I can inject fabricated intelligence into the Pentagon's secondary system, something compelling enough that Marwick won't be able to resist accessing it. If he acts on it, we'll have him on the record. I examined the glowing screen, thinking through every risk. And if he's cautious, we're back where we started, I said. But I don't believe he is, Ethan replied. He's desperate right now. That makes him careless. I nodded slowly. Fine, let's bait the hook. We crafted the perfect lure, a classified data packet purportedly containing the sole surviving inventory from the destroyed weapons depot. The file's metadata was designed to appear authentic, but would in reality trace every keystroke and network hop back to whoever accessed it. Hours later, the trap was set. I sat back in my holding area, heart drumming steadily, monitoring a small receiver Ethan had smuggled in. It would ping once when the decoy file was opened, twice when the trace completed. The first ping arrived less than 30 minutes later. I closed my eyes and barely permitted myself to exhale. The second ping followed almost instantly. Ethan's voice buzzed through the secure line. "We have him." Marwick accessed the file from a restricted terminal in Harris's wing. He even attempted to copy it onto an encrypted drive. "That's enough to flag him?" I asked. Ethan paused. "It's enough to implicate him, but not sufficient to dismantle the entire network. We still need the definitive proof." My jaw tightened. "Then we go and get it." Escaping from a secure holding wing demanded not brute force, but timing, precision, and the exploitation of every vulnerability I had cataloged since being brought there. I waited until the rotation between night watch shifts. The guard changeover left a 90-second gap, during which cameras were recalibrated and blind spots converged. Using a small strip of reflective tape Ethan had passed to me, I tricked the motion sensors into registering static movement in the corridor, purchasing precious seconds. The first locked door required bypassing a keypad. I didn't have the code, but I had learned the rhythm of the guard's keystrokes. During my years in Orion, I had trained myself to read patterns by sound. 3 attempts later, the indicator flickered green. I slipped out into the labyrinth of the Pentagon sublevels, each step measured. I cannot afford to be caught. My destination, the classified data vault where high-tier evidence was stored. Ethan had provided me the floor plan, but the vault was a fortress, biometric locks, thermal scanners, and continuous surveillance. I improvised. When a maintenance crew passed through, I blended into their column, hard hat pulled low. My posture shifted, my expression unreadable, but I moved as though I belonged there. Inside the vault corridor, I peeled away from the group and ducked behind a wall panel. Using a thermal reader I had jury-rigged from a sensor in the holding room, I traced the heat signature of the keypad. The last 4 digits glowed faintly. One more approximation, and the vault door clicked open. I stepped into a room lined with servers and sealed crates. The air was cold, humming with the energy of classified secrets. For a moment, I simply listened. No footsteps, no alarms, not yet. "Yuri," Ethan's voice murmured in my earpiece. "Once you locate the files, you have under 6 minutes before the system flags unauthorized access. Make every second count." I moved swiftly, navigating the digital archive as though it were second nature. Orion had conditioned me to think like a machine, search parameters, code keys, cross-references, and then I found it concealed behind layers of encryption, a directory link to Marwick and 4 other senior officers. I downloaded everything onto a secure drive, and then I discovered the file that changed everything. The document was extensive: financial transfers, weapons inventories, even correspondence connecting Marwick's group to an international arms syndicate. Each line of text drove the implication deeper. But one detail stopped me cold. Among the names listed in the conspiracy was my father's. "Ethan," I whispered, my voice hollowed out. He was silent for a moment. Could they have fabricated that to muddy the water? I examined the timestamps, the authorizations. "No," I said finally. "This isn't forged." He endorsed arms shipments he could not have believed were legitimate. They used him, but he allowed them to. He wanted to trust Marwick's loyalty. He chose to look the other way. I swallowed the obstruction in my throat. This was the evidence we had been searching for, but it also confirmed the worst fear I had been holding at bay. My father hadn't simply doubted me. His pride had blinded him so completely that he had helped enable the enemy. "Yuri," Ethan said softly, "you need to bring this in now. We cannot afford to lose this window." I pocketed the drive and made my way back through the vault, my pulse a steady drumbeat. Every corner felt sharper, every shadow a potential threat. As I neared the exit, a figure materialized in the hallway. Marwick himself, flanked by 2 armed guards. "Well," he said, his smile predatory, "I was wondering how long it would take you to crawl out of your hole." I didn't flinch. "I suppose you're not as perceptive as you believe," I said, stepping forward. He raised a hand, and the guards leveled their weapons. "You're leaving here in cuffs," he said. "You really should have remained in that cell." But I had one final card to play. I drew the small transmitter from my sleeve and activated it. Ethan's voice cut through the hallway silence, amplified through the intercom system he had compromised. "Colonel Nathan Marwick," Ethan announced. "You are currently broadcasting live to Admiral Rowe's command center, and you have just issued a threat against the commander of the United States Navy." The color drained from Marwick's face. The guards hesitated, exchanging uncertain glances, unsure whether to follow his order or stand down. I held up the drive so they could all see it clearly. "This contains everything," I said. "Financial records, weapons trails, communications. You can arrest me now and watch your careers disintegrate alongside his. Or you can step aside." The guards moved down my path. Marwick didn't move, but I could see the panic rising behind his eyes. I walked past him, my boots echoing against the polished floor. For the first time in days, I felt control returning, not merely over the mission, but over my own life. Now I held the evidence, and I was going to ensure the world witnessed every word of it. I walked into the secure Pentagon chamber with every pair of eyes following me. My boots clicked softly against the marble floor, but the silence was deafening. I carried the evidence drive in my right hand, my grip firm. Admiral Rowe was seated at the head of the table, flanked by senior officers. General Harris sat on the opposite side, jaw clenched, gaze fixed on the table as though he already knew what was about to descend. I stopped in the center of the room. "I have the truth," I said, my voice steady and clear. Without seeking permission, I placed the drive on the conference table and looked directly at Rowe. "This contains records of arms trafficking, data manipulation, and conspiracies involving members of this very council." Rowe gave a brief nod to the technical officer, who inserted the drive into the encrypted system. A wall of screens illuminated with documents, financial transfers, and intercepted communications. The evidence flooded the chamber like a cold wind. Gasps broke out when the first name appeared, Colonel Marwick. But as the file continued scrolling, additional names followed, names that carried prestige and influence at the highest levels of the military. My father's name appeared in bold alongside multiple authorizations. General Harris raised his head, his face drained of color, and for a brief moment I recognized the man who had once taught me to salute. He rose abruptly, fists clenched. "This is fabricated," he barked, though his voice lacked conviction. "It isn't," I said quietly. "I retrieved this from the Pentagon's own data vault, cross-referenced with the Orion archives. These signatures are genuine. You authorized shipments that disappeared into Marwick's network. Whether or not you understood the full scope, you enabled them." The room spun with murmurs. Some officers appeared stunned, others defensive. Rowe finally raised his hand, silencing everyone. "We are not here for theatrics," he said. "We are here for the truth, and it is before us now." I looked at my father then. His eyes were vacant. For years I had imagined earning his respect, hearing him say he believed in me. But now, standing before him with the full weight of betrayal between us, I realized I no longer needed it. Rowe ordered the evidence examined by a forensic team. But even before the results returned, General Harris rose slowly from his seat. I didn't know it would reach this far," he said, his voice low and fractured. I turned to face him, heart pounding. "You signed the authorizations, Dad. You fought for my removal. What?" He pressed a trembling hand across his face. "They approached me 2 years ago," he said, "Marwick and others. They told me that if I refused to help eliminate potential threats, they would destroy me, ruin my career, my reputation, everything I'd spent my life building. They told me you were compromised, that Orion had become a liability. They showed me doctored files, evidence you had gone rogue." My breath caught in my throat. He had believed them. He had accepted lies about his own daughter because his pride and his fear had left no room for trust. "I believed I was protecting the family's honor," Harris said, his voice fracturing completely. "But I was their instrument. They used me to isolate you, to frame you, to keep Orion buried forever." The admission struck me with greater force than any accusation ever had. My father hadn't simply doubted me. He had been manipulated into becoming a weapon against me. I felt a surge of anger, then sorrow, then something deeper, the hollow grief of understanding that the man I had once trusted would never be what I had needed him to be. "They threatened you," I said softly, "but you still made a choice." Harris nodded slowly, unable to hold my gaze. "I know," he whispered, "and I'll carry that shame for the rest of my life." The officers in the room shifted uncomfortably, witnessing the quiet collapse of a man who had once seemed beyond reach. Roe's expression was unreadable, but his eyes moved to mine, waiting to see how I would respond. I straightened my shoulders. "Then let's end it," I said. "Marwick and his network need to be dismantled entirely." Roe stood, his bearing commanding the room into silence. "Colonel Nathan Marwick," he said sharply, "you are under arrest." Two military police officers stepped forward to restrain Marwick, who had been seated stone-faced at the far end of the table. As they applied the restraints, his mask shattered, rage spilling openly from his features. "You think this ends with me?" he shouted. "You're all naive. The system you serve will consume you." Roe ignored him. "Remove him," he ordered. The MPs escorted Marwick out. Roe then addressed the remainder of the room, his voice unwavering. "The men and women of the Orion Phantom Unit gave their lives in the shadows so this country could rest in peace. We failed them. Today, that failure ends." He looked directly at me. "Captain Ursula Harris, call sign Valkyrie, you are hereby reinstated to full honors. Your record is cleared, your name restored. You are an asset this nation cannot afford to lose." For a moment, I couldn't speak. After weeks of isolation, humiliation, and betrayal, those words felt surreal. "Thank you, Admiral." I managed, my voice steady but subdued. Roe's expression softened. "You didn't only save yourself," he said. "You preserved the integrity of the institution we all serve. And for that, we owe you more than medals." I glanced at my father, slumped in his chair, the full weight of his decisions crushing him. He would not face arrest. Roe had already determined that Harris had been manipulated. But the consequences were their own form of sentencing. As I stepped out of the chamber, the corridor appeared brighter than it had in days. I was not naive enough to believe the battle was finished. Marwick's network extended well beyond the walls of the Pentagon. But for the first time, I felt something more powerful than anger. I felt free. Now, it was time to determine what to do with that freedom. The day following the final hearing, I received word that my father wished to see me. Part of me was inclined to ignore it. Nothing he could say would undo what had been done. But something deeper, something that felt like the possibility of closure, compelled me to go. He was waiting in one of the Pentagon's small conference rooms, stripped of the authority that had once encased him like armor. When I entered, he rose slowly, his posture heavy, his uniform exchanged for civilian clothes. He appeared older, diminished somehow, as though the weight of shame had physically contracted him. "Yuri," he said quietly, "thank you for coming." I didn't sit. "What do you want, Dad?" He paused before speaking, as if selecting each word with care. "I came to apologize," he said. "I was blinded by the family name, by the belief that our legacy was everything that mattered. I allowed fear to guide me, and it cost me my daughter's trust. I see that clearly now." I kept my expression composed. "You believed lies about me. You allowed them to weaponize you against me. Do you understand how close they came to destroying me?" He flinched, his voice wavering slightly. "Ido, and I'll carry that guilt for the remainder of my life. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Ursula, but I needed you to hear me say this. I was wrong." A long silence passed between us. I recalled the countless times he had driven into me that strength was everything, that weakness was a form of disgrace. And now here he stood, bearing his own weakness for the first time. "I don't need the family's honor," I said at last, my voice steady. "I don't need you to fight for it anymore. All I ever wanted was the truth. That's all I ever asked of you, Dad." His eyes shimmered with tears he wouldn't release. He nodded slowly, receiving my words. "I understand," he whispered. I turned to leave, but something made me pause at the doorway. "I hope you find a way to forgive yourself someday," I said quietly, "because I'm done carrying that burden for you." He looked at me, then as if truly seeing me for the first time. Not as a soldier, not as a mirror of his aspirations, but as a woman who had endured and prevailed in spite of him. He opened his mouth to speak, but I was already gone. 6 months later, my life bore no resemblance to what it had once been. I had officially resigned from the military, walking away from the world that had shaped every year of my adult life. Instead, I established a nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting veterans who, like me, had been discarded by the system they once defended. Our small office occupied a converted warehouse in Virginia. The walls were lined with photographs of men and women who had served in silence, their names too often forgotten. Every morning, I arrived early to brew coffee and review grant applications, acquiring skills that had nothing to do with weapons or missions. One afternoon, Admiral Rowe appeared unannounced. He stepped into my office, still carrying the quiet authority that made people unconsciously sit straighter. "You're difficult to find these days," he said with a faint smile. I gestured for him to sit. "I'm not hiding," I said, "just building something new." He surveyed the room, nodding in quiet approval. "You've built something good," he said. Then his expression turned serious. "But I have an offer for you, Yuri. The Orion Phantom unit is being reactivated, and I want you to command it. No one is more qualified." The word struck me harder than I had anticipated. There had been a time when that offer would have meant everything. But now I understood the cost intimately. "Admiral," I said slowly, "I appreciate the trust, but I'm finished living in the shadows. I've spent too many years fighting wars no one ever witnessed, carrying secrets no one was meant to carry. I can do more lasting good here." Rose studied me for a long, unhurried moment, then gave a measured nod. "I thought you might say that," he said. "Still, the offer remains open. And for what it's worth, I'm proud of you." Something eased in my chest. "Thank you," I said. He rose to leave, but paused at the door. "You remind me of why we fight," he said quietly. "Don't lose sight of that." When he left, I settled back at my desk and looked at the photographs on the wall. My life no longer revolved around missions or titles. I was no longer a soldier, and I didn't need to be. I was building something enduring, something that couldn't be stripped away with a torn uniform. And for the first time in years, I felt at peace. Before we say goodbye, I'd love to know, where are you watching from? Is it a quiet morning alongside a warm cup of coffee, or a late night where stories like this keep you company? Let us know in the comments. We read every one with gratitude. And if this story moved you, please consider subscribing to the channel. Not simply to hear more stories like this one, but to become part of a community that still believes in kindness, healing, and second chances. Thank you for spending your time with us today. Wherever you are, we hope you carry this story forward with you. And remember, sometimes the miracle doesn't knock on your door. It waits quietly until you're finally ready to open your heart.